In this video, I will be going over how you find the equation of a line when you are shown a picture of a graph on a coordinate plane, and then I will also reverse that and show you how you would graph a line when you are actually given the equation. These equations will be in the y equals mx plus b form, which is the slope-intercept form, and I'm going to go over first how you find the slope, the y-intercept and the slope, and then go from there. Now, before I go into the different parts of a line, let's review some important terms having to do with the coordinate plane. Now, I have here labeled the y-axis is the vertical, and then the x-axis is the line that goes sideways. So there's your coordinate plane. And the first thing you want to know and remember is that we have what's called coordinates. Okay? That's why it's called a coordinate plane. And so any place on that graph, I can put a point, and you'll be able to find where it is if I give you the coordinates. So, for example, let's say I have my point, my coordinate right there, the blue dot. So I can see it. Now I want to label it. I want to give the x coordinate and the y coordinate for that. So if we look at the x-axis first, see how many spaces over it is from 0. So you can see it's right at 4 when x is 4. So our x coordinate is going to be 4. Now from there, I'm going to need to find my y coordinate. I'll look to the y-axis, and it means that it's up 2 spaces. So that y value is 2. So our coordinate is 4, 2. Okay, now that we know coordinates, let's look at something called the y-intercept, or b. They call it b. So y-intercept is an important part of lines. And what does intercept really means? It means that something crosses something. So, for instance, it's where the line crosses the y-axis. So I just drew another point, and this is on the y-axis. Okay, and to be y-intercept, that means that, so that point right there is at 4 for y. And so if I draw a line through that, maybe connecting those two, the first point and then this new point, see the line goes through 4 on the y-axis. So 4 is our y-intercept. So B is 4. All right. Another thing we wanted to go over is when we see these drawn. Oh, also I can point out that while we're at it is that the y-intercept is usually what we care about in these equations. There is something called the x-intercept, and I just put one down where the third point I just put in, the line where it hits the x-axis, and notice that there it's x is 8 and the y coordinate is 0. Just like over when we did the y-intercept back over here, the x coordinate is 0, right? Because it's right on the y-axis. Because sideways you don't move anywhere when you're starting, but it's up 4. So that y-intercept is 0, 4, but b is 4. All right, so we've looked at those two things. Now another thing we want to look at is slope. Now we call slope m, lowercase m, for some reason. I don't know why. But when they say m, they mean the slope. Now all that means is the number of spaces to get somewhere. So we want to do, let's pretend we're at one point. We go to one point on the line. And we're standing there and we want to be able to get to a second point on the line. But you're only allowed to go either up and down or left and right. You can't go on an angle when you travel. Okay, so you're going to have to give directions on how to go from one point to another point. So we're going to look at something. Let's look at, and then what we do is really look at it. We're going to be specific. We're going to put the number of spaces you go up or down when you're going to the next point. And then we're going to write that like a fraction bar type thing. And then underneath that, we're going to write the number of spaces. It is really left or right, but I suggest always just going to the right. I'll do spaces right. And the reason I do that is just keeps it straight out. So in order to do that, then you have to pick your first point has to be like farther to the left than your next point. Okay, so in this case, I would start at one point and then move to the right. You'll see how it comes out here. Okay, so I need to go from, I want to figure out the starting point. And again, I always use the point farthest to the left, and that right there that's the y-intercept, the 0, 4. And then the next point over that I have is that one right there, the second point, and I'll call that the end point. Of course, the line doesn't really end, but for my little slope thing I'm getting here, that's where I'm going to end up. So it's like I want to go from the starting point, I want to go to the end point, and I can only go up or down, and then left or right, but we're just going to go down and to the right. So that's going to be how we do our slope. So what are we going to do? So we're going to start at our first point. I went down 2 and then right 4. That's how I got to the end point. Down 2 and then I had to go to the right 4. All right. So when you go down, or sorry, that should be right. That should actually be right 4, but so let's just say it was down. The important part I want to point out is when you go down 2, you have to put a -2 there, and then underneath we would put what is sideways. So let me just change that. It is really, because this was 4 spaces, so this is really a 4. I can just erase that, and then so it's really down 2 and then to the right 4 spaces. So it's really down 2 is a -2, to the right is a +4. We need to simplify that fraction, so that comes out to be -1/2, or -1/2. And you can also write it the way I just wrote it, or you can also put the negative in front, then put the fraction bar, then put the 1/2. Both of those are acceptable. This is actually easier when you're working with slope. And so that's our slope. That is what we call m. So those are 3 really important ideas and concepts to have in place before we get into the details of linear equations. So now that you know how to find the slope of a line and also the y-intercept, we can create an equation to represent any line on the coordinate plane. So let's look at the example we have here with the red line. So we want to find first what the slope is. So remember that m stands for the slope. So, and b is going to be the y-intercept. So if m is the slope, remember that for the slope what we need to do, we're going to find really the amount that you go up or down from a point, and then we're going to write that over the amount that you would then need to go sideways to really get to the next point. Okay, so let's call that this point here that I have marked is the start. All right, even though of course it doesn't really start there, but we're going to say that that's our starting point. We're going to start at that point, and then let's call this point over here, let's call that the end point. All right, and then let's say we're going to be at the start point and we want to and go to the end point. What directions do we need? Well, from the starting point, notice, and you can only go up, down, left, or right. You can't go on an angle. That's the rule to count for the slope. So from the starting point, I would go up 5 spaces, and so therefore my amount up I'm going to put as a 5, a +5, but I can just write 5. It's up, so it's positive. Then I need to find out from where I am right now, where I'm directly up 5 from the point, I'm going to need to go to the right. How many spaces? I'm going to go 3. So that means I went 3 sideways, and again it's to the right, so it's a positive. So I'm going to write 3 underneath the 5. So now 5/3, or 5/3, that is my slope for that line. And it's going to stay the same throughout the whole line. I don't need to keep doing it. I know it's going to stay the same because it's a line. So that's my slope, and of course m is the symbol for the slope. Now we just need to find out the y-intercept. Now the y-intercept, again, that's where the line crosses that y-axis. And we can see that's right there on that y-axis. We are at a, again, y-intercept is b, but we're at -3. Right? So now we can make the equation. Equations for lines can be in the form y equals m times x plus b. Right? So that's our model. Now, what that means is when I go to write my equation for this line, I'm still going to write the letter y. I'm going to write the equal sign. And then instead of m, I'm going to replace it with what the m came out to be. So our equation of our line, this is actually called slope-intercept form because we have a slope and we have the intercept. So we have y equals, and then I'm going to replace the m with the slope, which was the 5/3. I have to write the letter x again. And then I write plus, and then I'm going to put what I got for the y-intercept, which was a -3. So right now I'm just going to put plus -3. We can simplify this to y equals still 5 over 3x. Then instead of writing plus -3, you're going to want to just write -3. So that right there, that is the equation for this line that is graphed, y equals 5/3 x minus 3. So next we'll go into how you would draw a graph when you are actually given the equation. Now in this situation, we're not given the actual graph, we are given the equation in the y equals mx plus b form, the slope-intercept form, and we are asked to graph that on the coordinate plane. So the first thing you want to do is to plot the y-intercept on the graph. So the y-intercept again is the 4. Right? It's at the end of the equation, and it's a positive 4, it's a plus 4. That's what we call the b in the y equals mx plus b. So that goes on the y-axis up there 4, and that's putting a point there, coordinate, because that's where this line is going to cross the y-axis at 4. That's the y-intercept. The next thing I want to do is use the slope that I'm given to get to my next point from there. So the slope is that -1/2. So it's really -1 over, well, the slope is, it's -1/2. We can also, to make it easier, let's put the negative with the number on top. -1 over 2, because now I'm going to look at it as negative means down 1. So when you have the situation where you have the slope is -1/2, or in the negatives in front of the whole fraction, make it easier on yourself. Put that negative sign with whatever number is on top. So now the slope we can see is -1 over 2. So that's my directions from my y-intercept. So I'm going to go down -1, and I'm not putting another point there. I just sort of have my pen there. And then from there, I'm going to go over to the right 2, because the slope was down 1, right 2. At this point, I put the point. There's my next point. And when we're graphing those, we want to keep going with that pattern. So I'm going to go again down 1, and then I'm going to go right 2, and I'm going to put another point, and so on, to get a few points. And here I'll also point out that we probably want to be able to graph the line to the left of the y-axis to see what it would look like. So here to do that, you're kind of going to reverse the process. So let's say we're at the point that I just drew, the last point. If you were to go backward to try to get to the previous point, you would need to go up 1 and then left 2. This kind of reverses it. Okay, and so I would go up 1, left 2. So just notice that going up 1, left 2 is still a -1/2 slope. So it's still the same slope. I'm just looking at it a little bit differently. And so I'm just reversing the process. You'll see the pattern here. So I'm going to my y-intercept that I started with, and I'm going to go up 1 and then to left 2, and I have the next point. And that's the way you can kind of graph, and I did it again, up 1, left 2. Then we want to draw on the line, and you've graphed the equation here, y equals -1/2 x plus 4. That's what the line will look like when you graph it out.